Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Been a few days now since we just spoke, but lots been happening. We've got lots to talk about. Nice to have Lloyd back. We're delighted to have our Eva back. We didn't think our Eva was going to be here today, and we're also delighted to have Greg here. And as you can see with Mr. Boswell there with his shirt and tie on, he'll tell you about his court case later. He was found not guilty. I immediately, as soon as I saw him in a tie, I thought he'd been in court, but apparently not. But there you go. But I got to start the podcast this week on a rather sad note, because even though there's different parties, we're no longer in the SNP, but we've lost one of the members of our movement. And Techie, could you stick up that on Jean Freeman, who sadly passed away this week after a very short illness. And she was, was the health secretary during the COVID times. And, to lose any of our independence people is a shame. Eva, would you like to say a couple of words about Jean?
Yes, please. Firstly, very deepest condolences to her partner Susan, her family, her friends and all who loved her. Jean gave a lifetime of service to Scotland, and there were a couple of instances where I came across her work on a personal basis, and one that's very dear to my heart and to the hearts of all women in Scotland and those who care about Scottish women's health, is that shortly after Jean became the Health or Cabinet Secretary for Health, I learned that the breast cancer screening programme didn't operate as it should. There was supposed to be breast cancer screening for women aged between 50 and 70. And it turned out that in very many areas, if not throughout the country, it was being rolled out to women between 53 and 67, because the line was it was to be done every 3 years. So it didn't need to start at 50 and it didn't need to end at 70. I emailed Jean Freeman's office directly and I got a personal reply from her within a couple of hours, and she got onto the job immediately and began to rectify that difficulty. So I took my hat off to her at that point. I subsequently became involved in a particularly difficult set of circumstances for a local lady I knew who was being treated in a local hospital and things were not going the way they should. And again, emailed Jean, and within less than a day, she had her sleeves rolled up and she was in about it, and that particular problem was addressed and solved immediately. There were other areas of public life where she made enormous contributions, including social security, the judicial appointment system, the police and other areas. And for all that there are controversial aspects of Jean's career, as there bound to have been, there's no doubt in my mind that her contribution to Scottish society at large and to the community of our country was enormous and in many respects almost unrivalled. So it's a very, very sad day, and I'm so sorry that it come to an end really quite prematurely and in the most difficult of circumstances.
Indeed, condolences to her friends, family and partner. And that's all the more reason we're losing people that are not a rapid rate, folks. So we need to really get our act together and get our country free. Well, this week, Phil, we announced that at last the Electoral Commission had made an alliance to liberate Scotland an official party. And it's going. And the reaction since has been quite amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, very, very impressed. It's been extremely positive, especially from those who see and understood the construct of the Yes movement, what was special and unifying about that and why it worked. For me, what is different about the Alliance to Liberate Scotland and all the other parties is that it does exactly what it says on the tin. As an umbrella vehicle to bring individuals from all parties and none together under a single unifying principle, independence, nothing less. I mean, there's some key specific differences that people ought to be aware of. And one is that the leadership of the Alliance to Liberate Scotland at every election is by the Alliance itself and all the parties that are affiliated to the Alliance. So we manage the election strategy, but it's strictly based on one policy, independence, nothing less. So this allows the parties that fall under the Alliance to Liberate Scotland, or the New Yes movement, if you like, to have their own policies, be it SNP, ALPA, ISP, sovereignty, so they can continue to develop specific policy that distinguish themselves from others, so that once we are free, once the people are free and get rid of these chains that bind us, the people can decide which kind of Scotland we want to live in. And for me, it won't be extreme left or extreme right. So these alliance partners can therefore unite under an election that focuses on the unity of the single policy of independence, nothing less, to free the people of Scotland from this union of unequals, effectively releasing Scotland from the colonial status it currently suffers under. The second key difference is that the group of individuals that manage the party throughout and overall, that is the Alliance to Liberate Scotland party, which we didn't want to be a party, but the rules dictate that we have to. These leaders will not stand for a position in the Scottish Parliament or Westminster while they hold senior office within the Alliance. So unlike all the other parties, there's no conflict of interest. All these other parties have got people all jockeying for a position and trying to get in on the list, trying to get ahead of each other, fighting and bickering, whereas we hold dear the core principle that the people come first. The people come first, and that's why we're interested in outcomes, not incomes.
Well said, Phil, absolutely. And Greg, as one of these candidates who's going to be standing, you put yourself forward, if I'd say without embarrassing, you don't have never, since you stepped forward, have you said, I want a career to be an MSP? This is about one thing, it's an outcome for you, not an income. You just want to see your country independent, and it's the same with all the Alliance to Liberate candidates.
That's correct, Roddy. That's absolutely, totally correct. I've got a career. I'm an electrician, you know. I've got a job. That's where I work. I work in the high voltage substation sector. I'll give you a call, Phil. But aye, it's not about careers. This is not what this is about. This is about freeing our country and freeing our people, freeing us from the chains that Phil spoke about there. We need to take the opportunity in May. This is a big opportunity. It's the biggest since 2014. 2014 almost got us there, but didn't get us over the line. This could be the game changer in May. But what we are saying is that Alliance to Liberate Scotland, we're a game changer. If people get behind us and vote for us, then we could do this. But we need members, we need activists. We specifically need activists. We need people out in the streets, because we all can't do it ourselves. We need to get the troops out there and get the leaflets posted and talk to people on the doorstep. That's how we're going to win the hearts and minds here. But I am actually seeing, you know, a lot of positive support on social media. People are talking about us now, and especially since we announced that we're now registered, you know, as a party. Obviously, we didn't want to be a party, but we are registered officially now after a long, hard effort. But people are now positively talking about Alliance to Liberate Scotland, and that's what we need. We need this conversation to happen, because we need more people to be talking about it and sharing all the information out there and bringing more people on board. We need to win the hearts and minds. People need to let the penny drop here, that we stand for what we say. We stand for independence, nothing else, nothing less.
Absolutely, well said. Now, Alan, you're out and about all the time. You're meeting the public, and you've been at all sorts of meetings. Since the announcement, have you noticed a difference? Have you heard anything on the street?
There's a big difference. I mean, before the registration, people were a bit sceptical. They've been led up the hill too often and led right back down again. So they weren't quite sure, because we weren't registered yet. So they didn't know where we were going. And to be quite honest with you, it was very, very difficult to get registered. All the blocks and delays were put in our way. I mean, I was at one stage writing a report for this Court of Session over self-direct funding against Glasgow City Council. And at the same time, I was trying to change the constitution that the electoral register was wanting, which was changing words that meant exactly the same thing as what we actually had within our constitution. The logo, blocked our logo because it was 0.2 millimeters too short. I mean, it was just ridiculous. But now that we are registered, people again have hope, because we are moving forward. We are doing what they have asked for many years. Because for many years, this movement has saying, we need unity. Well, we've now given you unity. Certain political parties are refusing to come on board because they are putting their party before the needs of the country. We are putting the country's needs before the needs of any party. And that is the biggest difference between us and other areas of this movement. Now, that there is some unionists, I've noticed that they've taken a very keen interest in us now. Many of them coming on and saying, you can't put independence on the ballot paper. It's a general election. Well, our name alone is independence, the Alliance to Liberate Scotland. And that doesn't just mean liberate us from the coloniser who controls us at this present time. That means liberating us from the entire system of their government. In an independent Scotland, things will be much more different. The civil service will be accountable. The politicians will be accountable. The people will again have the sovereignty that is genuinely, lawfully theirs. They will be the ones who are making the decisions.
Thank you, Alan, for that. Lloyd, of course, you were with us when we had the launch, unfortunately, which is a real shame because you put in your shift like the rest of us here. Are you excited now that we're underway and what the shackles are off and the handbrakes off?
Yeah, very much so. But I think most importantly, because with the gap between support for independence and support for the Scottish National Party now at approximately 20%, then what we're doing, and it's always been very important to me, is at every single election, the electorate have to have the opportunity to vote for independence. That was the basis that took me into the Scottish National Party back in 1975. And it looked like for a while that we were going into this election in May without a choice for the people to make specifically on the issue of independence. Now, as you've said as well, the door is still open. This umbrella, Liberate Scotland, if the Scottish National Party, the Scottish Socialist Party, and all the other so-called pro-independence parties come under that banner, and we have that opportunity to vote for the alliance in May, then the possibilities of us achieving independence within the next year to 18 months is absolutely on the table. But that requires the unity that Phil talks about and that we all talk about. But the key thing here is this is not about a flash in the pan. And I've heard plenty of folks saying you won't win any seats. That is not the point. The point is we deliver independence in this country with the majority of votes and or the majority of seats. Therefore, each and every vote cast for a party that supports independence is a vote for independence and should be tallied together. For that opportunity exists in May of this year for people to vote for Liberate Scotland when they clearly, because 20% of the independent supporters are not prepared to vote for the Scottish National Party, then the Alliance to Liberate Scotland gives them a place to cast their vote. And those votes count exactly the same way as a vote for the SNP is. They are votes for independence and should be seen in that manner. It's also important to remember that in a circumstance where there is such a gap in belief between those that support independence and those that support the Scottish National Party, that it's absolutely essential that there is another electoral force for those people who are no longer find it possible for them to vote for the Scottish National Party, but they can cast a vote for independence. And that this is something that will carry on from the election in May to the next election, to the election after that, until our goal is achieved. And the goal is very straightforward. It's independence, nothing less. Independence, nothing else. And until we achieve that independence, we will recognise, honestly, that we've not achieved our aim. This is essentially the problem with the Scottish National Party. The Scottish National Party believes that winning elections within the British system is success, when in reality, the only success is the achievement of independence. And that's what we have to keep reminding ourselves of. Independence, nothing more. Independence, nothing less.
Well said, Lloyd. Joined in 1975. I would call it a Johnny come lately. Some of us were there long before that. Eva, how have you felt or noticed since our announcement during the week?
Invigorated and encouraged, a bit disappointed with some people who refer to us splitting the vote, but that's because they're not looking at the detail. And the detail is, as others, including Lloyd, have just set out, there are at least 20% of independent supporters who are never going to vote SNP given the current leadership. We also know that there are many within the SNP who are friends of us here in Through a Scottish Prism, and who are friends of us who represent Alliance to Liberate Scotland, who agree with us that May this year should be our electoral event. It should be our opportunity to vote for independence, nothing less. I go back most weeks to talking about the rebels at the SNP conference and their desire, which they continue to hold, for unity within our movement and for, in essence, a plebiscite or a de facto referendum in May. That's entirely possible if those who support independence actually facilitate a vote for independence, nothing less, and don't settle for either continued devolution, which is what the SNP leadership are offering, and no more, or think that the outcome somehow will be that a plea to whoever happens to be sitting in number 10 will deliver the referendum, which has been now rejected on almost innumerable occasions. Alliance to Liberate Scotland is not Westminster-centric, because it's designed in, for and by the people of Scotland. It's a Scottish solution. We're not playing by Westminster's rules, because there's no reason why we should, because Scotland, in his famous words, is a country, not a county. And that's what Alliance to Liberate Scotland demonstrates. And if you need any more persuasion, just look at this week's opinion polls. Reform are only 5 points behind the SNP in the list vote, allegedly. Well, if there's any credibility or credence in that at all, that only bolsters the argument for Alliance to Liberate Scotland, and it underscores that those who say both votes SNP or that the SNP is the only route to independence are this time, once again, very much barking up the wrong tree. So I would invite once more those who support independence to look very carefully at what we're offering and see that that is a guaranteed route to independence, because it creates a unity of purpose, unity within the movement, and it delivers the prize that we say within the movement we want. Not individual bums on individual seats, but a collective, strong representation of people determined to keep independence in the forefront and to regain that independence sooner rather than later.
Yeah, two things I'd like to say. We showed in a meme that we put up during the announcement that if we go SNP 1 and it was to be Liberate Scotland 2, we'd get 32 seats. This, that they're only 5% behind, because the SNP list seat votes are going to be the same as last time, 21, they're going to count for nothing. And with the Reform Zeke Hyle party 5 points behind, they're going to pick up 30 odd seats if the SNP votes don't switch to an independence party. That's just a fact of what we're doing. Now, this week wasn't just all about Alliance to Liberate Scotland, as important as it is, but there's something I'd like to bring up now. Some of you have maybe been following the case of Mark Hurst, a good friend of this show, and an all-round good egg, who, as we know, had a court case where he was wrongfully, they said it was but the ruling came out, it was a failed prosecution against him. But the ruling came out this week. I'd like to start with you in this one, if I may, Eva, because what the judgment said was, yes, they accepted that he should never have been in trial. It was ridiculous that he'd gone. However, I was shocked and stunned to hear that Scots law is incompatible with the European Convention of Human Rights. I don't know if it came as a surprise to you or not, but it was quite shocking and stunning that happened. And if I may, before you answer, if I could just read out, I got this from Mark, who was talking about, it's been over 5 years since I first raised this action, and 9 months since the Court of Session hearings before Lord Lake that set out the grounds for my case against both Police Scotland and the Crown Office for what we believe was a malicious prosecution brought against me in 2020. When we began the legal action, we were under no illusions that we were going up against the two most powerful institutions of the state. We have only ever sought to reveal the truth about the nefarious nature and motives behind the criminal prosecution brought against me that began in March 2020. I was fully acquitted at Jedburgh Sheriff Court on the 7th of January 2021, with the Sheriff accepting a motion by my then defence team of no case to answer. The evidence presented by the prosecution was never challenged by my defence, and no other evidence was submitted by the Procurator Fiscal in support of the Crown's case. The evidence that was submitted, a short video lasting just 2 minutes and 38 seconds in duration, was judged by the court to be an opinion and nothing more, and according to Sheriff Patterson, who heard the case, would not have caused any reasonable person fear or alarm. Nonetheless, the full vigour of the Crown Office was applied to the prosecution, with senior prosecutors in Edinburgh and Glasgow consulting each other on how it should proceed. They then in turn took advice from the Crown agent, the most senior official at the COPFS, who's responsible for overseeing prosecutions and who advises the Lord Advocate directly. That involvement alone for what was meant to be a breach of the peace is remarkable and is likely unprecedented in Scottish legal history. In addition, Police Scotland deployed, I've lost my place, sorry. In addition, Police Scotland deployed at least 5 detectives who normally work in serious and organised crime to lead the investigation and carry out the search of my property. This was the same police unit who investigated and gathered evidence in cahoots with the Crown Office, but failed to secure the prosecution in the Alex Salmond case. Millions of pounds of taxpayers' money has been spent and wasted by these failed, politically driven prosecutions, and that must, in fact, already has raised concerns about the integrity and impartiality of the Scottish justice system. There's a bit more, but it's enough to say, what do you make of that statement from Mark, and what do you make of the judgment, Eva?
I'm going to declare at least 2 interests here. One is that Mark Hirst is a friend of my family and has been for decades. And I know Mark very well indeed. I'm disappointed in terms of my second interest as a lawyer to see this, because you'll imagine that when I started uni 46 years ago, I wanted to be a Scottish lawyer because I thought that that was a good and positive thing to be, and I was proud of the Scottish justice system. But when I read the concluding remark of the judge, I'm absolutely disgusted and appalled, because what he says quite correctly is, I make a declaration under the Human Rights Act 1998, Section 4, that the Criminal Procedure Scotland Act 1995, Section 170 is inconsistent with the European Convention on Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, Article 6, the right to a fair trial, because it is an unjustifiable restriction on a pursuer's right to have a determination of the merits of his claim that he was the subject of a malicious prosecution. So there you have it, from the highest court in the land, that Scots law is incompatible with international human rights legislation. This is a lacuna, a hole, an area of massive concern that the Scottish Government should be legislating for urgently, because if you have been, or you can claim to have been, maliciously prosecuted, you need to have an avenue to go down. Otherwise, you give the police and the prosecution carte blanche. And this will not be the only malicious prosecution occurring in Scotland. And this will not be the only area where people are concerned that there has been undue political motivation or undue political influence put upon those who have pursued the prosecution. Because go back to Mark's own words, he did not have to present a defence. The sheriff ruled there was no case to answer. There was nothing. There was no evidence. It was without merit. And that takes you very strongly into at least a prima facie case at first instance that there has been malice afoot. But if you add into this the fact that we, the general public, are not allowed to know the identity of the accusers or the complainers in Mark's case, it takes an extremely sinister turn, and that has no place in Scottish society or in a system of justice of a country that considers itself to be a functioning democracy, where public officers and officials are accountable to the people and not to each other and not simply to politicians.
Yeah, Phil, I was to say, what concerns me, and I don't know the legalities of it, but the 2 things that get me is that these were to me, they come across with what Alex Salmond and with Mark Hirst were political prosecutions. And on both occasions, we're not allowed to know who the accusers are. The accusers, the people, when there's no case to answer, are protected. The people who committed perjury against Alex Salmond, we're not allowed to know who they are, and the public don't need to go. It's actually quite sinister and frightening that that's where we are in Scottish law.
Yes, and Eva, of course, articulates it perfectly. But this, as she said, is not the first, and it won't be the last malicious prosecution in Scotland. And the Craig Murray and Alex Salmond trials scream out to me exactly what's wrong with the Scottish judicial system at the moment. They're screaming out for proper investigation by a truly independent body. Because, folks, the only thing I would add to what Eva say, which I completely agree with, is you need to understand what Article 6 of the European Convention of Human Rights is. It's the right to a fair trial. That's what's at risk here, folks. And in the determination of his civil rights and obligations, and I'm reading from the Act, of any criminal charge against him, everyone is entitled to a fair and public hearing with a reasonable time by an independent and impartial tribunal established by law. Judgment shall be pronounced publicly, but the press and public may be excluded from all or part of the trial, okay, in the interest of morals, public order, or national security in a democratic society. And there's the rub. Where the interests of the juveniles or the prosecution or private life of the parties so require, or to the extent strictly necessary. But what else is, I'm not going to read the whole thing out, but everyone charged with a criminal offence shall be presumed innocent until proven guilty. That was not the case in many of these cases and investigations that we've seen. Trial by public, by the press, in effect. And everyone charged with a criminal offence has the following minimum rights: to be informed promptly in a language which he understands, to have adequate time and facilities to prepare the defence, to defend himself in person or through legal assistance of his own choosing, to examine or have examined witnesses against him and to obtain the attendance and examination of witnesses on his behalf, to have the free assistance of an interpreter if needs be. I mean, Eva's nailed it, but this is fundamental to human rights. And to have that even questioned under Scots law is despicable, and the Scottish Government had better do something, and better do something quick.
Now, you'll probably have noticed, ladies and gentlemen, that our Eva has left the building. Just in case you know, she was in hospital yesterday for a procedure, and she's been still in a wee bit of pain, and she came in here because she was so determined to talk about this matter and on this, because she thought it was very important. But she's now left, getting some painkillers and then a lie down. So we thank her for her efforts. Can I ask if any other gentlemen want to comment on this case before I move on to a similar one? Alan, you would like to say something. On you go, please.
Yeah, I mean, we keep hearing this as Scots law, but look at the dates. The Criminal Prosecution Act 1995. The referendum for a Scottish Parliament was 1997. The Parliament came into existence in 1999. This was Westminster law. It was them who made this. It was them who did not make sure it complied with European human rights. And it is them that I believe are the only ones who could change this, because it is human rights, which is a reserved matter for Westminster. So I think even if the Scottish Parliament did make the amendments that's required, Westminster will have the right to stop it because it is a human rights issue. And that is another reason we need to have independence.
Yeah, excellent. Greg, you said you'd like to say something on this one.
Aye, Roddy. I mean, Alan's actually just pretty much touched on where I was going to go with this, because basically the ECHR law, the law has been governed by Westminster, by English law, you know, in Scotland. We've got our own Scots law. We're proud of the Scots law. However, it's weak in areas like this. It's weak when there's areas that are still reserved to Westminster. I mean, there's a multitude of different stuff, you know, that comes under different courts, you know, that we don't have a direct say because it's reserved law. I mean, the other area I wanted to point out is that the prescription case that Craig Murray and Cherry are taken through, you know, that's another example, a good example of where, well, on that case, we can actually look at that and potentially overturn, you know, an English law that's applied in Scotland and say, no, Scots law does stand for something up here, you know. So there's various different things going on, you know, regarding Scots law, and some of them are good to see, but in this one, this is terrible, because this gets right to the core of human rights, as we've all said here. And something needs done about this. The Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Government need to, get on this case and get it sorted ASAP.
Yep, you mentioned Craig, but here's the thing though, Greg, and I might be wrong, Eva can come back and tell me, but even if the Court of Session rule in the favour of Joanna and Craig, the government could then appeal to the Supreme Court in England and overturn it. That is my belief on that. Yep. I'm not sure, but I'm sure Eva will let me know, or the viewers will. If I could come on, if you don't want to speak in that one, Lloyd, I'd like to give you something else, because we've just talked about a malicious prosecution against Alex Salmond, a malicious prosecution against Mark Hurst, and there was the other one, of course, against Dave Llewellyn. But we're not allowed to know who the accusers are of Mark. We don't know who the alphabetes were, but something similar. They all complained when a jury of peers found Alec not guilty on all of these charges. And down south, we had a case this week, is known as the Fulton Six, and we've had a similar outcome where they were tried in the media, they were tried in Parliament. There was pressure certainly from an outside, I would suggest, from an outside foreign country who have brought pressure to bear. But when even after a jury of their peers found them not guilty, they're not stopping. They're wanting a retrial. They want their pound of flesh. British justice, never mind just Scottish justice, but English and Scottish justice has become very politicised.
Yes, it has. But I mean, it's you and I have been around for long enough to remember certain things, like the Birmingham Six, the Guildford Four. British justice, when elements of politics enter into it, then the idea of justice goes to the bottom of the pile. When there's a requirement for a political solution, when there's a requirement for a political answer to maintain the narrative of the time. I mean, for those that don't know the details, effectively what we're talking about is the prescription of Palestine Action and members of Palestine Action, which effectively says that Palestine Action is an equivalent organisation to the Red Army faction, to the Ulster Volunteer Force, to the Provisional IRA, to organisations that use violence for political means. Now, to make the equivalence between Palestine Action and an organisation like the Red Army faction or the Ulster Volunteer Force of the IRA is utterly and completely ludicrous. But this is the narrative. The narrative from the British is that anyone who takes direct, non-violent direct action in support of the Palestinian cause is a terrorist. It's an absurdity. It's an utter and complete absurdity. It's in the same way as the suffragettes, prior to the First World War, breaking the windows in Oxford Street, chaining themselves to the gates and the fences of Westminster, that they were terrorists as well, because it's the equivalence. That's the equivalence. What's pernicious about this particularly, and you referred to it, Roddy, is the fact that despite the fact that they have been found not guilty, these people have been effectively convicted in the court of public opinion through the newspapers and through the media coverage of their trial. In the same way as Alex Salmond suffered exactly that same fate, to be judged and tried and convicted in the media, and through the media controlling public opinion, despite the fact that in the actual court case, he was acquitted, in the same way as these people have acquitted. Yeah. But again, when it's politics, when the British establishment has not achieved what it wants to achieve, and what it wanted to achieve was confirmation of the prescription of Palestine Action and the severe conviction and exemplary sentences to be handed out to those people in this particular grouping. None of that has happened. As a result of it, the media has to carry on with its insistence that despite the result of the jury-led trial, despite that, same as in the Alex Salmond case, these people are effectively guilty. Now, that's the dark hand that Phil often talks about, the black arts of politics, manipulating things in the background. We claim in this country, or rather the great British claim is that there's a separation of the judicial system and politics. This is an outright lie. There's no question about that. And particularly when the political narrative is the narrative of the current sitting government, remembering that they are the ones who prescribe Palestine action, in the same way as those that put the Birmingham Six in jail for something they didn't do, and the Guildford Four in jail for 20 odd years for something they didn't do. It was the necessary narrative of the government of the day.
Yep.
That government was British. And this will continue to happen, and it will happen to us and our people like Mark Hurst, and as it happened to Alex Salmond and to anyone in this country. And there are people in this country who have been charged for being supporters of Palestine action. When they go to court, they will go to court on the basis that they should be subject to the narrative of the current government. Until we break away from the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, all of these cases, from now and into the future, will be dealt with in exactly the same way, because you cannot separate the political desires and needs of the British government from so-called British justice.
Yeah. Another one we haven't mentioned when we're talking about here was what happened to Craig Murray, the jigsaw. The first time in the world anywhere in Scotland where they used a jigsaw. Even though he didn't mention them by name, the judge would say, yeah, but you told them, you knew who it was and you were telling everyone else who it was, even though you didn't. Because I think you were guilty, so you're guilty. That's what we're against. But the other thing is, even some people who were promptly supporters of Alex Salmond and were saying, great, and they were getting upset because even after he was cleared, they were complaining, there was people complaining at the jury. The same people who were saying that's wrong, the jury cleared them, are on the other side of the argument here down south, saying, yeah, well, they are guilty. And the biggest lie that's going round just now is the one about the sledgehammer and the policewoman. Because those that were in court, may I read from it, during the Fulton 6 trial, body cam footage released to the jury, some of which can be viewed in the video in this article, showed the exact opposite. It was the Elbit security guards assaulting activists with sledgehammers, not the activists using sledgehammers against the security officers. So, the twisting of it, Alan, and it is a political prosecutions.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion, the way things are going is every press outlet, every politician should be done for sub judice, because they now try people through the public press while a court case is going on, trying to manipulate a jury. Thankfully, a lot of juries are not falling for it, and they are following the law and the evidence and doing the right thing. But on this case, I mean, there's a lot of people saying that they've vandalised this place. They deserve to be punished for that. Well, actually, look back in history. Many people, including at Fast Lane, went in and they vandalised nuclear submarines. They were found not guilty. And the reason they were found not guilty was they were preventing a greater crime, a crime against international law and a crime against genocide. The weapons that these people were dismantling and vandalising were being used against women and children in Palestine. They were murdering people, not for war. They were murdering people in a genocide. And they had the legal right to go in there and stop it. It has been found out in courts. But this nonsense where the British media are trying to find people guilty through their headlines rather than through evidence has to stop. And they must now start facing sub judice legislation and be fined and possibly even criminalised, because that's what they're trying to do to others. They're trying to get people locked up for doing what they're entitled to do in law. And the judiciary have to come away from the politics now. It used to be a case of there was a distinction between the political roles and the legal roles. That doesn't happen anymore. They are both merged and they are both being run by a political master. It's time to get that separated again, and we need that separated again, because justice can't only be done, it needs to be seen to be done in an open, transparent way.
Isn't it funny, Phil, all these cases that are failing, and a lot of the woke ones are failing as well, that's all going. Now our governments on both sides of the border want to get rid of jury trials, because heck, when the public get evidence and they don't give the decision that they want, so let's get rid of the juries, they're saying. That in itself is a worry as well.
Massively, and it's why we need accountability, and that's the thing about London. London doesn't listen to us. Edinburgh, we can go there and be represented. Even in the Islanders that used to say in London they don't like us, but in Edinburgh they hate us. But that's not the case. You can be accountable if you've got a parliament in Scotland. But we need to understand the details here. This is designed to stop complaints on the government and complaints on issues that the government don't want you to shout about. It's designed to destroy lives, and it does. So if you read the Cage International report on this, the Felton Six, they declare victory as the prosecution defence of Israeli genocide fails to return a single conviction at trial. What happened though? The first 6 activists of the 24, Felton 24 this is, with the rest still being held on remand, were tried in relation to an action at Elbit Systems Research and Development Facility at Felton, Bristol in August 2024. Now, Elbit Systems is, as we said, Israel's largest weapons manufacturer and a key supplier to the Israeli military. The action sought to disrupt and expose Elbit's role in producing weapons used against Palestinians, including drone technology. Okay, now the defendants were held on remand for up to 17 months prior to trial. So for speaking the truth, your life can completely be destroyed by being held wrongly for 17 months and then a trial comes along. And their prosecution was repeatedly cited by ministers, bought by the Israeli government, in support of the prescription of Palestine action. The case raised serious concerns about political interference, as it bloody should, and the use of counter-terrorism frameworks against protest, against the people. The government against the people. So after 8 full days of deliberation in February this year, the defendants were not convicted of a single offence, and the refusal to convict any of the 6 defendants on any charges, including on the most serious of charges, is a powerful affirmation of jury equity and brings to a humiliating end one of the most politically charged trials of this year thus far. But as we said, it's not the first, won't be the last, and if the government get rid of juries, where then justice? This we really need to get a hold of. This trial has exposed how pre-trial detention and public spectacle were used to punish defendants in advance and to deter others, because that's the whole idea here, from challenging Israel's largest arms manufacturer that is involved heavily in genocide. Say it loud, never shut up about it, always talk about it. So the prescription of Palestine action must now be lifted, hopefully in Scotland. I know Greg mentioned it earlier, and more power to Joanna and Craig. And all those held as a result of this political process, currently in prison, should be released immediately.
Across the pond, they're complaining that Donald Trump is weaponising the Department of Justice. And people over here saying it's terrible, but the usual suspects here, all the right-wingers, are the ones over here. They're absolutely doing the exact same here in the UK, Greg. They're politicising the justice system to get rid of dissent, to not allow us to complain about whether it be nuclear weapons or genocides or whatever government policy it is. It's scary. And they say, oh, North Korea and Iran and Russia and China are terrible. We're getting worse.
No, I mean, as everybody said, it's politicising the judiciary and politicising the police, and it's nothing new. Whilst we're attached to this rotten union, you know, and we're being controlled from London, we suffer under it, because this goes back hundreds of years. The English were great spies back before the union. Then the British state basically put it on steroids. After the First World War, there was a thing called what was it called now? Economic something. It was basically a spy network it was all the spies from the First World War, you know, that was getting used. They had to keep them employed, so they created these covert organisations to spy on the trade unionists and big industry. That then came all the way through into the 50s and 60s and get even more covert, more powerful. Things like the SDS, the Special Demonstration Squad, we had snatch squads taking people out of the peaceful demonstrations, and you know, look at the miners' strike, how all the BBC reversed the camera, reversed the film, to show as if the miners were to blame. It was the police on their horses that charged first and caused all that, turned it into a riot. It goes on and on and on and on. It's historic, and there's no way out of this, in my eyes, until we get independence and we can start our country afresh, and we kick all the mechanisms and the machinery of the British state out of our country once and for all, because it is rotten to the core. And the judiciary, the police force, they're all corrupted, by politicisation. And it's politicisation, as we've said, because they're trying to teach the general public a lesson. They're trying to hit us over the head with a big stick and say, just you remember where you belong. You belong down there in the mud. Don't you be speaking up here. And that's what it's all about. So these people that flung paint over these jets, as Alan said, they were doing as a service. They were doing what the Rolls-Royce workers done with Pinochet's jets when they blacklisted their engines. They were doing the exact same thing. I was looking into it, and basically I think about it mentioned aggravated burglary. I think that's potentially what they could potentially get charged with. I mean, they could probably escalate that with the aggravated part on it, but it's certainly not terrorism. Absolutely not terror. That's absolutely ridiculous. Even trade unionists and other activists are on a domestic terrorism list in this country now. For the police and all that to keep an eye on us now. How can you class trade unions as domestic terrorists? And it's all part and parcel of all of this escalation and twisting what things mean. And they're twisting what terrorism means, and they're now trying to say that peaceful protest is up there with terrorism. Absolute nonsense, ridiculous. But as I said, as long as we're in this rotten union, that this will continue. There's no end in sight, so we need to get independence to get the hell out of Dodge.
Absolutely. Another one, which some of you won't remember, maybe you will, Lloyd, but there was talks later, the MI6 were getting ready to take out Harold Wilson because they didn't like the way he was looking, maybe a wee bit too lefty for them. To me, he wasn't lefty enough, but that was one of the other ones that he was. They were getting ready to remove him. But here's one this week we can't not discuss, and as the clock ticks on, and this might take us a wee while, but there's someone who should be tried, hung, drawn, and quartered, in my opinion. That's Mandelson. Now, I'm sure all our viewers watching know exactly what was going on. He was appointed as the ambassador to America by Starmer, probably on the orders of Tel Aviv. Most of his instructions come from there, from the Labour Likud party. And the guy's been a crook. He's been sacked 3 times. They know he was staying with Epstein even after he was convicted of paedophilia. And it's now coming home to roost. But we've since heard, Lloyd, we've heard that he was passing out information during the bank crash and other suggestions that he was giving more financial information so that this man and his hedge fund could make a lot of money. This is treason that's been committed.
Yeah, I mean, this is what's astonished me about the British coverage. The British coverage is all about his relationship with Epstein and the trafficking of children for sex. In Europe, in mainland Europe, in the English language newspapers and in the English language media in mainland Europe, the focus of the coverage of Mandelson is about the fact that he passed British state secrets to Epstein. Epstein, who at the time was working for the Rothschild Bank and was part of a hedge fund. And the information that is clear from the communications that have been released, he was effectively telling them what British government monetary and economic policy was on a number of different things, all of which in normal circumstances would be seen as insider trading. In mainland Europe, it's been pointed out that in Belgium, Holland, France, Germany, the communication of sensitive economic information from a government minister to someone who operates within the financial services industry of another country is in actual fact treason. That he should be charged under the Defence of the Realm Act. That this is not, a man who simply made a phone call to tip off his mate about a good horse in the third race at Southwell. This is major stuff. But we're not. The British press is not talking about this. They're still talking about Cuddly Mandy, the person that everybody in the political bubble knows, and how powerful he is, and how 2 weeks ago they were all quite happy to call him a friend and ask him round for dinner, but now he's persona non grata. But the essential element here is his feet should not have touched the ground. As soon as that piece of paper that states about the government, about the bankers' bonuses, and about the British government's choice not to make an assault on the bankers' bonuses, that in itself should have led to him being charged with treason. That is privileged government information that he passed to an activist of another country. It is absolutely astonishing that we're focusing on something which in reality does not go right to the heart of the real corruption in the British government, because the real corruption in this it is obvious from the relationship that those communications show between Mandelson and Epstein, that Mandelson was constantly passing Epstein information that came from cabinet meetings of both Blair and Brown's governments. Now, by no stretch of the imagination could this be termed as simple gossip mongering. These people knew exactly what they were doing when they were passing on the information. And the bit I look forward to is this. When Gordon Brown decided to sell the bullion of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland at a knockdown price, had Mr. Mandelson any involvement in that decision to make that? And more importantly, did Mandelson pass that information to Epstein and his cohorts in New York? But the real thing here is, when people in the establishment get caught, like, for instance, the former prince or the current Prince of Darkness when he's been caught, everything in the reporting is about toning down their potential offences. It's all about sticking to somebody else's narrative. When the reality is here, we had a government minister who was passing classified information to a foreign national. That, in anybody's understanding, is treasonous, and he should be charged at the earliest possible instance. But he won't be, because he would bring down too many other people with him. And that's the tragedy of this so-called United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It is an utter house of cards that they have to continually keep putting sticking plasters on to preserve its own failed sense of itself.
Yeah, and the rumours are that he may get himself into Israel where he cannot be extradited, and he's entitled to citizenship and get a Palestinian house for nothing and free electricity, free everything, and he can avoid justice there. But they're always talking to us, Alan, and saying how terrible it is in these other countries and how lucky we are in the British Union. If I could just give you two instances, I hope I pronounced this right. Tang Yajun, the ex-Minister of Justice in China, just this week, for accepting just 19, but in relative things, 19 million in bribes, has been sent to jail for 20 years. Tang Rajan, the ex-Minister for Agriculture, was sentenced to death for corruption. Han Yong, a former senior political advisor, was sentenced to death with a 2-year reprieve for accepting bribes for 30 years. Now, this is the country we're told to dislike, but they know how to take care of it. Finland jailed their bankers and freed the people. In this country, the people picked up the bill and the bankers got their bonuses. This country is rotten to the core, as we've all said here today. We've got to get out of the union because that's how corrupt it is. Mandy will never face justice.
No, I mean, the punishment for corruption in this country is a peerage in the House of Lords. That's where it all gets sent. That's how I call them, the vermin and ermine, because that's exactly what they are. But I mean, Sarwar is heavily involved with Mandelson as well. I mean, is it any wonder he is now trying to claim the Scottish Labour Party are a different party from the British Labour Party? I'll tell you one thing, Anas. Not even Fabrice can get rid of the stench of corruption within your party. It is so strong. I mean, Mandelson was kicked out of, was it 2 or 3 other cabinets? They knew he was corrupt. So why was he brought back there in the first place? And Epstein was his Mossad informant. That's who he had to pass on all the information for the Israelis. That's how corrupt this whole system is. And that's why we don't just need to get independence from Westminster. We have to become independent and liberate us from the entire political system that we have been living under for so many years, for hundreds of years, because it is totally and utterly corrupt. We have got to make sure our politicians are true to their words and accountable to the people. We've got to make sure the civil servants are accountable to the people. We've got to make sure our laws are accountable to the people and not open to corruption. And that's why lobbyists have got to be outlawed as soon as possible, because lobbyists are there spending money and bribing people, but doing it in a legal way so as they cannot be charged. It is corruption. It is bribery. Doesn't matter what else you call it. And it has to be stopped. And only an independent Scotland will be able to do that. And that's why people have got to be very careful when they go to vote on the 7th of May. Because if you vote the wrong way, you're going to be letting these unionists in, and in particular Reform. And don't forget, the Reform Treasurer is up to his eyeballs in this as well, because he's been involved with Epstein for many years, selling. Nigel Farage's argument is, but he's only selling them properties. Were these properties used to home the sex slaves that Epstein was travelling around the world? Is that what these properties were used for? Were you aiding and abetting that man in his prostitution rings, and his child exploitation rings, his child abuse rings? These questions have got to be answered, and have got to be answered now and not covered up. The whole political system, especially in England, are up to their eyeballs in this Epstein scenario, and it's time that people knew exactly who was behind this.
Yeah, not just England. We believe our ex-Prime Minister Gordon Brown got several mentions and things. I'll watch what I say. I don't want to be getting huckled next time I come home. But they're all sort of distancing themselves. Apparently, Wes Streeting, who was one of Mandelson's biggest heroes, has deleted anything with the name Mandelson on it. We've got Sarwar here trying to dodge, who's got the cheek to be talking about the integrity of the First Minister. Well, he's been hanging about and palling about with your man here. But the way we can in Scotland get rid of it, Phil, when the time comes for independence, start with a written constitution. Well, you must have jury trials, have it written into constitution, have it that there can be no lobbying, that no foreign country or government can be interfering in our politics or being allowed to lobby in our government. There's all sorts of things we can do to make sure that we protect ourselves by a written constitution, something we don't have in the filthy union.
Yeah, correct, because there's so much wriggle room for these weasels, and that's exactly what we can do by having a smaller, nimble economy, a tight judicial system, and a regulated process, protocols, and a constitution that sets out the rights of the people, all based on the claim of right that we, the people of Scotland, are sovereign. So there is absolutely no reason. Scotland is perfectly placed to do such a thing. We can live in a society similar to those that I'd most admire currently in the world, which are those of the Scandinavian countries, where you can become a millionaire with hard work, but really hard to become a billionaire. The people get looked after, and it's a marriage of capitalism and socialism, where justice is there for the people on the most part, except when they get weaseled in and succumb to the European Union, which is another corrupt institution. So that's the great thing. We get to choose which institutions we come into or out of, and we, the people, decide through our government that we vote for. But Anas, I mean, I know the Independent was talking about this. They challenged Anas Sarwar to disclose all correspondence with Mandelson here. And the SNP, in fairness to them, I asked after the Scottish Labour leader said it was right Lord Mandelson had resigned from his party, he's facing calls, Anas Sarwar, to disclose all his private communication, as he bloody should, with the SNP in issuing the challenge after the Scottish Labour leader said it was right that he quit, right? So Sarwar said, oh, big drama, he'd be horrified by the information about Lord Mandelson contained in the latest batch of the files on paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. What do you mean the latest batch? This has been going on for decades. There's been stuff trickling out, enough to make any decent person question what's going on. But no, not for Sarwar. Lloyd set out perfectly, and Alan added to it. The Labour Party is now full of little rich boys like Mandelson and Sarwar in what's supposed to be the party of the people, the working man, my backside. So Anas Sarwar and Labour have no place to hide in this. Enough has come out over time, way before this latest release of pieces of the Epstein files, which incidentally should all be out in the open, but as the guys have rightly pointed out, it's a house of cards that will very quickly fold. And anyone with a conscience would have stopped and take stock a long time ago of having any business dealings with someone like Epstein, Mandelson. So these guys, they don't have a conscience. That's the problem. They only stop when they have to stop, when they're caught with their hand in the till. We must pursue prosecution on all counts, and Mandelson should be in prison, along with the rest of them.
No. Another one I saw this week was that, what do you call her, Fergie, Andrew's ex-wife. She took her daughters, aged 18 and 17, to Epstein's to stay at Epstein's house after he'd been convicted of paedophilia. It's a joke. But that's the thing. I mean, the corruption we've gone over about today, Greg, and the lies and the politicisation of politics. But the other one they're trying to sell us now, the latest one that the media's all on, and no one's questioning it, and Mark had a rant about it, that Epstein actually he wasn't anything to do with lovely little Israel, that lovely country, that law-abiding country. He was KGB. He was one of Putin's men. I mean, it's I was laughing. But these bastards are actually trying to spin that lie.
Aye, it's diversion, classic diversion 101 tactics. Blame the Ruskies. The Ruskies are to blame for everything in the world that's bad. I mean, whether he is Mossad, whether he isn't Mossad, it doesn't matter to that extent. It's what he was doing on that island, as we've all spoke about, and it's the heinous crimes that's been committed, that he's been accused of, and it looks pretty much as if he's done them, and he's upheld that island. The thing is, it's political, as we know, because he's basically got names on a list now. And he's got dirt on everybody, and all the politicians all in the world, and all the movers and shakers, and Mandelson's right up there. And Mandelson, the wee weasel, was doing this all through the Blair government, and he's still in the background. Now he's in with the Starmer government, although he's suspended or resigned or something. But one good thing, if you can take any kind of good thing out of all this, is I think Starmer's time's now numbered, and potentially the same with Anas Sarwar. So we could get a double whammy here with the two leaders, stepping down or being pushed aside, which might play into our favour for the May elections. But if they do step down, and it'll cause an upheaval with the Labour Party, then we need to capitalise on it in this election coming. And if we don't capitalise on it, then we've all got ourselves to blame. As a country, we need to move and get out of this union, as we've all said, and get away from these people, these horrible people, despicable. And it's created through power, politics, and power, and who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. And this is what Epstein was all about. I think it was all to entrap all these politicians, and have dirt on them, so you could then control all the economies in the different countries ultimately, and that then leads you back to the one state that's doing it, and we know where that is. That's Israel. So. Yeah, we have to try and move now while they're on a shaky nail. That's what I'm saying.
It's another week, Lloyd, and again we've had another couple of Tories jumping ship over to the other Tories or reformers they're now self-identifying as. And one of them was the leader of the Barnet Council. He's been made the leader in Wales. He was leader for the Tories in Barnet. How insulting is that for the Welsh? The other one I've got to say is the latest one, another Tory, James Evans. Now I want to play two quick videos for you. This is classical, hypocritical, grifting extraordinaire.
I want to come on to a couple of other topics. James, let's talk to you. You'll represent Powys, part of Powys anyway, and you know where I'm coming to now. Some of your councillors have defected to Reform. They've had enough of the Conservative Party. Are you going to join them?
No, I'm not. And let me be very clear, Rob. Reform UK does not have a plan for Wales. They have slogans, they have complaints, but they have no serious policies. And with all the going-ons in Westminster this week, I don't even think they can have a leader they all support. And if they can organise themselves, how can they possibly claim to be a credible alternative for Wales? And let's not forget, these councillors have just joined a party that supports expanding the Senedd. And one of those councillors who has moved spoke to me a couple of weeks about how disgraceful this was for Wales and how much it was going to cost. I'm sorry, these people are total hypocrites. And for Reform UK doesn't represent Wales. They've got no clear plans for Wales, no clear leader in Wales. And I think they've
very clear there, Lloyd. They have absolutely no plan. They're not good for Wales. Anyone that goes there is terrible. Here he is this week.
That's how the Welsh media in Wales works. It's driven by left-wing activists who pass themselves off as journalists. And to me, and I'm sure, like me and many people around Wales, I think they are just unpaid Plaid Cymru and Labour Party campaigners.
He's jumped his reform. He went to reform this week. Look, not that he's chasing the grift. No, not at all. Sincere, I'm sure. Very sincere.
Oh, I totally and completely sincere, like everybody on the right always is. It's a straight fight in Wales between Plaid and Reform in May. That's obvious from all the opinion polls. What's wonderful about it is, for the first time in a long time, the people of Wales have really woken up to the idea that the Labour Party can no longer defend them. And the defections from, in terms of the electorate, the most important people, the ones that mark the X on the ballot paper, are shifting their position to Plaid's position, not uncritically, but what they have done is, what they've recognised and they see very clearly here is, Reform is an English colonialist party in Wales. And those in Wales who want to join Reform are seen very clearly by the vast majority of Welsh people as selfish, narcissistic collaborators, and that's all they are. As a result of that, Plaid Cymru has had a huge boost, but more importantly than that even, the boost in support for independence for Wales has been huge over the past year because of the interference of Reform in the politics of Wales. Now, I'm not in the least surprised by massive defections from the Conservative Party to the Reform Party, particularly in Wales, because many, many moons ago, when the Social Democratic Party was formed by a bunch of rebels from within the Labour Party, there was a huge uptake from the right wing in Wales who went to support the SDP at that time. But the key thing for us here is, we need to recognise that what Reform is in Scotland is it's simply a replacement party for the Conservatives, and it's it's bringing in exactly the same kind of people as it is in Wales. Those in the Conservative Party who have recognised that, particularly to be in local politics, is a bit of a guaranteed golden sinecure. And if you're likely to lose your seat, then what you do is you make a plan B. And the plan B for Conservatives in Scotland is to join the Reform Party. And that's all that's happening. And what it does is it crystallises the fact that in right-wing politics in Britain, and we are assuming we are still part of Britain, in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, is if you're on the right, you can shuffle from one party to the next party and back again as oftentimes as you want, because effectively what you're doing is you're stating your complete support for the status quo.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, in Scotland, there's at the absolute outside, right at the absolute peak, 25% of the people of this country support the status quo. That's just a reality. That is the ceiling for the right wing in Scotland. And that's why we're seeing the defections from the Tory party to Reform, and why we're seeing Reform rising. The key thing for us is, and this is where the SNP is failing the people, is that they need to be shouting from the rooftops that Reform is a British nationalist party. It does not have the best interests of the people of Scotland at heart. It has the best interests of its own members and their own venality at heart. And what should be screamed from the top of the rooftops by John Swinney and the leaders of the Scottish National Party is, if you don't want to have to deal with this nonsense, then in the 6th of May, vote for independence. A vote for independence is a vote for Liberate Scotland, for the Scottish National Party, for the Independence for Scotland Party, for sovereignty, and for all of those who support the principle of our right to self-determination and to independence, and that we can make this happen in May, and that way we won't need any reform in Scotland, because as we all know, and most of the people in this country know, the only reform Scotland needs is independence, but we need our leaders actually saying that on a day and daily basis between now and the 6th of May.
Well, we know how pedantic people can be, so I just want to say this. It was a slip of the tongue, Lloyd. He meant the 7th, because if you go in the 6th, they'll not be there, you'll not be able to vote. It's the 7th, okay? So don't tell us, we know it was a mistake, just a genuine mistake. Don't give us any nonsense about it. But I would pull you up and say they're English nationalists, absolutely English nationalists to their core, not British nationalists. You know, Lloyd rightly referred to them as English colonialists in Wales. They're the exact same in Scotland, and people should be aware they will shut the Senate, they will shut Holyrood, they will shut down Stormont, and they will take everything back to London. That's their policy. They think that Mother England is what should be running the whole thing again.
Yeah, I mean, the first person to ever take 30 pieces of silver did the honourable thing with a tree and a rope because he had a conscience. I bet you none of them will be doing exactly the same. But, I mean, the worst thing about Reform is the way they have been able to manipulate many of their members. Because I'll be quite clear with you, you're going to suffer just as much as everybody else. They're using your money, your support, your shoe leather to get around the doors. And right after the election, when they're elected, they're going to look after their very rich buddies. And you are going to be shafted. So don't say you have not been warned. Every single one of these Reform leaders talk about immigration, people coming over to this country, taking our jobs, taking our houses. They've all got houses in foreign lands. They take their money from British nationalists who have moved abroad, taking somebody else's house, taking somebody else's land. Is it okay for us to do it to other countries, but it's not okay for them to come over here? The hypocrisy is stinking. And people have to open their eyes. If you want real change, like Lloyd said, if you want real reform in Scotland, then change the entire system of politics and governance. And that is through independence, and only through independence.
Yeah, yeah. You know, one of the problems they're all is I think both Lloyd and Alan have said it, Phil. They're all cheeks of the same bum. And we've got the Labour Friends of Israel, we've got the Conservative Friends of Israel, we've got the Liberal Party's Friends of Israel, and not wanting to be left out. This week, Reform, let's not forget, Nigel Farage's party are launching a Reform Jewish Alliance and Friend of Israel groups. You're getting no different. You're just getting one more extremist who will deny genocide, who will stop, jury trials, who will close the Senate, who will close Holyrood. That's what faces if we don't wake up.
And it does, and it will face us because it's happening, and we can see it happening in front of our eyes. Those who are paying attention can see this, and I would urge all to do so, and more so to do something about it. Moreover, Reform has been warned that defecting Tories will damage its brand. How can it do anything other? Well, if you're part of the radical right, then having more radical righties is a good thing, correct? Well, if you want to get more than the 25% ceiling that was talked about earlier by Lloyd, you're really going to appeal to someone else, and that's not working. The first evidence of this is in. There's a guy, Matthew Barnfield, he's a postdoctoral research fellow in the Department of Politics and International Relations at Queen Mary University in London. He wrote for The Conversation on Reform. Tory defections and early signs of brand damage. Now, it's not one that jumps off the shelf naturally at you, but Mr. Barnfield does go on to say that since Reform UK took several high-profile Tories, in the space of a few weeks, a debate has arisen about whether these new recruits benefit or harm Nigel Farage's party. Now, some suggest that the loss of Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick, amongst others, hastens the demise of the Conservative Party to Reform benefit. But there's also the risk that in embracing high-profile Conservatives, Reform is tying its image to the unpopular aspect of the government they once represented. And apparently there's a danger for Farage in becoming Tory party too. Well, duh. Of course, because that's exactly what they are. A new version of the same party, and the electoral roundly rejected this in 2024. And there's some polling in that backs this up. But from my own perspective, I would add that the named Conservative defectors that we've seen are some of the most extreme and unpopular Tories that we've seen to date. Suella Braverman and other minority representatives like her were used by the extreme right in the Conservatives to implement their most aggressive and fascist policies. As to who's better to do so, as when challenged for such fascist policies, they have the advantage of being able to pull out the race card to deflect from the real and true issues at hand. And what you're going to get with Farage and these uber right is the destruction of the NHS. Don't misunderstand this. That's exactly what they said they're going to do, and they'll do it. They'll destroy education. The future for your children will be bleaker. One in four kids in poverty, make that 1 in 3. That's what you're voting for here. And if you're seriously going to do that, then I'll hold you accountable and we'll come looking for you.
Here's the thing, Greg. Phil said, getting Tories will ruin their brand. But will it? I mean, for example, I think he's chairman, Zaya Youssef. He's had 6 visits on Question Time in 16 months. And I mean, Nigel Farage is virtually on every other bloody week, because we have not just got corrupt judges and legal system now. Our media is as corrupt as it can be, and they're promoting these people, the extreme right wing, anti-immigration, pro-poverty, get rid of any regulation for business. So it is a danger. I mean, and we have launched a new independence party, and the independence paper promoted supposedly the National didn't even print our press release to say there was a new independence party. That's the difference. The right wing and the Brits got all the publicity. The rest of us have got to work damn hard to get it because they try and stop us.
Well, our very own Colette Walker was trying to get onto debate night only to sit in the audience. Apparently she was almost there. She was getting selected, and then they pulled the plug, right? Yeah. And on that show that night, you had a Reform spokeswoman on that panel. I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful. It's clear politicking, with the BBC, and it's interference. It's state interference writ large, and to keep somebody like Colette out there. Colette was going to be the champion. She was going to speak for all the small folk, as we talk about. She was going to be the people's champion there and raise a few questions, but that was stopped deliberately. I mean, all I'll say regards to Reform is, once a Tory, always a Tory, and we all know what Tory means. It's Irish for outlaw. They rob and they plunder. And what are they going to do to the NHS, our social services, our Parliament, the Parliament in Wales? Yeah, and water, anything they can get their grubby hands on, their grubby privatising hands on, that's what they're after. They're neocons, right-wingers, vote for independence, folks. Vote for independence this year, kick the fascists out of Scotland. That's all we need to do. Just get them the hell out of Scotland and vote for independence.
Fascists and paedophiles everywhere. Guys, we've run out of time. But I just want to stress you all watching, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the support so far and everything else. But you'll see it on the bottom. Join the Alliance to Liberate Scotland. We need more foot soldiers. We need more activists. We need more candidates. We need more everything. You've got to help us if you want to prevent some of the stuff we're talking about today. We need help so we can help our country. So until we see you again, you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.